Good evening. I'm Kim Cumming, the Managing Director of the Michigan Ross Executive MBA program. I'm delighted to welcome you here tonight. I want to begin by reminding you that we'll be closing our panel today with a live Q&A. We'll be taking questions from both our in-person and live stream audience, so leave your questions in the comments below if you're tuning in online. You may have seen our host and panel moderator for today here on TV in Los Angeles or in the film Blades of Glory. But today she's here not only to inspire you, but to introduce you to an amazing panel of women and spark conversation as we talk about the future of women's leadership. Angela Chi is a keynote speaker, media and communication coach, and entrepreneur. A former TV news anchor and reporter with more than 20 years of media experience, Angela traded in the red carpet for a role educating business leaders on how to break through barriers, find their voice, and step into the spotlight. She is now an entrepreneur on a mission to help women amplify their message and mission through speaking, video, and media. Angela has worked in top TV markets from Los Angeles to San Diego. She's hosted shows for networks like E! Entertainment, HGTV, and Channel 1 News, and has appeared as an expert on a variety of local and national shows, including The Today Show. Angela started speaking when she was 15 as Miss California National Teenager. Now, as an entrepreneur and mother of two, she continues to speak on topics related to women's empowerment, communication, diversity, and media. We are honored to welcome Angela Chi.
Hi. Thank you. Good evening. Are you guys ready to celebrate? Are you ready to celebrate? Yes, tonight we are going to have a very lively discussion about the future of women's leadership, but it's also a time to celebrate you watching on the live stream, to celebrate all of us, all the women that came before us, and all the future generations that we will continue to impact. It's really important for us, sometimes as leaders, we forget to pause and to reflect, to really step back and to see how far we've come, right? And because we're celebrating, that doesn't mean we aren't taking a look at the reality, that the challenges that we face, and maybe looking ahead of how far we may still need to go. Because that's what International Women's Day is all about. It's a global day to celebrate the achievements of women, started in 1911. But it's also a call to action for gender balance. This year's theme is Balance for Better. And that is what we're going to do today. We hope that we will inspire you to take a look at the challenges that we face, as well as celebrating our successes. All of us have a story. Each of our panelists have a different story and a different journey that got them to where they are now. And it's those challenges that make us stronger. What is your story? What are you most proud of? What challenges shaped you? Today I'm going to share a bit of my story, and I hope that it will help you discover yours. Ever since I was little, I wanted to be like Connie Chung. I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles, just about 30 minutes from here in Cerritos. Well, maybe an hour and a half. How many of you guys were in traffic? And right now, at this time, it would take a little longer. And I remember every time she would come on TV, we would gather around, and I was fascinated by the power of television. I was fascinated that there was someone on the TV that looked like me. And for those of you who don't know who Connie Chung is, she worked here at KBS, Channel 2 in Los Angeles. She was one of the first Asian newscasters. And she was the only Asian woman I ever saw on TV growing up. And she was also the first woman to co-anchor the CBS Evening News. So when I was 8 years old, my dad said to me, "Hey, you could be like Connie Chung." And I thought, huh? Oh, okay. Maybe. Who knew that one day I would be? But you see, my path to success wasn't that straightforward. After college, I didn't go into TV news. There was something that was blocking me. I worked at Paramount Pictures as an assistant, helping launch Entertainment Tonight China behind the scenes. So not a bad job. I loved working at the studio. It was so exciting. But I had chickened out. I didn't go for my dream. Something was holding me back. Maybe I was scared to be on camera and not actually go for it. Maybe I only lived about half an hour from here. Maybe I didn't want to move away and go to a small town and make no money. Whatever it was, I had a block. You see, when I was 8 years old, my dad told me that I could be like Connie Chung. But as I got older, my family also said things like, oh, that's going to be really dangerous for a girl. You're going to be standing out in the rain. Do you think you can make it? I mean, look at Connie Chung. She's not married. She doesn't have children. Like, what are you going to do? Are you really going to do that? So do you think maybe those subconsciously, maybe that stopped me? I don't know. But those blocks were there, right? Fortunately, it didn't stop me for long. So I worked a few years at Paramount Pictures, and I thought, you know what? If I don't give this a shot now, I'm going to regret it. So I did everything I could to figure it out. I took broadcast journalism classes at night. I worked at local cable stations. I even worked 7 days a week for more than a year, 5 days a week at Paramount, and 2 days a week I'd drive three and a half hours to Palm Springs, my first reporter job, covering every story that I could, all kinds of stories. And after several years in small markets, I made it back to my hometown here in Los Angeles. I had gotten my dream, right? And I had worked at the same station that Connie Chung worked at. I made it back. That was my first job at KCBS. So that's the end of my story, right? No, that is just the beginning. My journey continues, and so does yours. And it wasn't about me getting to that goal. It was about the challenges that I faced getting there. Sometimes it's the challenges, it's where you get to after you go through those challenges and the person that you become. Right? So my journey is not over, and either is your journey. It continues. And these are the challenges and the breakthrough moments, these moments in your life that stick out in your brain that you need to celebrate. And you may have more than one, several. And these are the moments that you need to remember. You see, because when I reached that goal, it wasn't the end. Now my calling, my mission, is to help women leaders own their power and their voice, and to amplify their message and their mission, and to step into their leadership. But you know, that was my calling all along. I didn't go into TV news to be famous. I didn't even necessarily want to be on TV. For me, I think I saw it as a way to have an impact, to have a voice, to help other people share their stories and their voices. That was what it was for me, and it's basically the same thing that I'm doing now. You see, I know what it's like to be in the spotlight. But I also know what it's like to break through barriers and also to struggle to find your voice. Ones that I'm still breaking through every single day as a mother, as a wife, as an entrepreneur. Growing up a shy Asian girl raised by immigrant parents, I was taught to play it safe, to play it small, to not rock the boat. My parents left their country from Taiwan and moved here and started over. And at many times, they lost their voices. Fortunately, I was able to break through a lot of my barriers, but they did not. They lost their voice so that I could find mine. Their sacrifice is my privilege, and I will not take that for granted. Who gave up their voice so that you could find yours? And are you ready to step into that gift that you were given? You see, it is time for a new conversation. It is time, ladies and men, for you to join the conversation, to step into the gift that you were given. The time is now. The world needs you. They need us. Something is shifting. I can feel it. Can you feel it? But is it making a difference? And until we turn our intentions and our feelings into actions, we will not see the change that we need. I believe until women truly own their power and their voice and step up and speak up, and all of us change the collective culture and the conversation about what it means to be a woman and what it means to be the leader, we will never see the change that we need. It is not about leaning in anymore. It is about stepping up and speaking up and changing the collective conversation and having all of us, men, women, organizations together to create that change. So I honor you and thank you for being here for this important conversation of how are we going to move women's leadership forward. This is the moment tonight that I hope we will spark conversation. We will inspire you at home, inspire you here to take action, to see a new model of leadership. But it starts with you. I believe you already have everything you need to succeed. The time is now for you to shine and to step into the gift that you were given. Thank you. So now I would like to welcome our 4 panelists so that we can continue this journey together and talk about the future of women's leadership. Our first panelist is a nationally recognized expert on fiduciary and remedial issues. Dana Muir is a Michigan Ross professor teaching a graduate course on employment and diversity issues. She is also a passionate supporter of the positive role business can play in shaping society. Please welcome Dana. Thank you, Dana. Up next, our panelist is Michigan Ross EMBA student, current student, Mika Yokoyama. Mika is the Director of Procurement, Business Operations, Risk, and Data Analytics at Takeda Pharmaceutical. She's also the founder of the Executive EMBA program, new student-run series, Equity Chat. This program highlights the accomplishments of women across fields, showcasing a variety of proven leadership styles. Please welcome Mika. Next up, we have Jessica Clemens, operating model strategist at Accenture and a 2017 Michigan Ross EMBA graduate. Jessica is a passionate advocate for diversity, inclusion, and health initiatives, lending her time and expertise to numerous nonprofits in the LA area. Please welcome Jessica. And to round out our panel, we have Anissa Rydell. Anissa leads global strategic programs and initiatives at HP and also lends her consulting skills to the U.S. National Committee for UN Women. Anissa is a 2015 Michigan Ross Executive MBA grad. Welcome, Anissa. And with that, let's get started. Thank you for making it through traffic, getting off work, being here. I know we're excited to have this conversation with you. How are you guys doing? Woo! Woohoo! Turn up the music, we'll turn it into a dance party. All right. So we've seen the success of women. We've seen something shift. There's a lot of inspiration in the room. There's a lot of inspiration out there, but there's also some challenges ahead. Right? Beyond our titles, our stories, our different journeys, and that's what we're going to explore today. And we know that as women in the workforce, we still face a lot of different challenges. So let's start there and talk a little bit about what people are facing. I want to ask you a little bit about what are some of the challenges that you've seen in the workforce and how did you overcome it on your path?
Sure. A challenge that sticks out in my mind is a time when I was about to start in a big meeting, and one of the leaders asked me to sit in the corner, take notes, and not speak up or join in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised, obviously, astounded, but I thought to myself, the way he's asking it, it's as if it's expected. But I took a moment and paused and thought, I was invited to this meeting for a reason. I'm supposed to be here. Yeah. There are people that are looking for my opinions, suggestions, and recommendations, and I belong here. And so, as calmly as he asked me to sit in the corner and take notes, I politely responded back to him, thanking him for his feedback. And I sat in the middle of the boardroom table right across from the head of the organization and not only joined in the discussion, but led the meeting.
That's right. A lot of times you think that these things don't happen anymore, but you have different cultures, different companies, and different situations. And who knows where the thought process he was coming from. But it's important to talk about these things so that they still happen. But I love how you handled it with just as much grace and tact, right?
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, do you have a story to share, or what's your reaction to that?
Well, it's not unfamiliar. So I too have been invited to a meeting and asked to sit quietly and take notes. But I want to talk a little bit more broadly about the microaggressions and being that person. There was a commercial that came out, and I think we used it in a training workshop here for unconscious bias, but where a woman in the room gives a brilliant idea, and then it's not well received, and a couple comments later, a man in the room gives the exact same idea, and it's like he invented the wheel. And that's happened to me more than once. More than once that happened. It happened so much that I thought there was something wrong with my communication style. And so I spent a lot of time and effort working on the way I communicated. And it must be me. It must be the way I'm getting my ideas out. And let me work more on tailoring my message and all these different things. So a lot of effort spent there. I'm happy with how I developed my communication style, but it took a long time to realize that it wasn't me, and there was something to be learned by the people in the room, and that you have to respect the ideas, and to work in a team environment, you have to treat every team member equally. So that's been my experience with one example of the microaggressions.
Well, it's so interesting you talk about unconscious bias, because like a lot of times, yes, we still need to speak up for ourselves. Yes, we still need to have good communication skills in those situations. But it's interesting, like you said, about the unconscious bias. A lot of times, you know, we all have them. Even women have them against other women. It's not just a, you know, man against woman thing. So, and I know that you actually led a course on that, so we can elaborate on that more later. But it's something for all of us to really just take a look at, you know, and check ourselves too. Yeah. Mika, do you have anything to add?
For me, I actually didn't realize I was overcoming these hurdles because I was a woman. I thought it was, you know, paying my dues. I'm the young analyst. I'm new to the role. So I have to go through these steps, and I'm supposed to sit in the corner. And it wasn't until actually somebody else came to me and said, hey, why are you doing that? You shouldn't be sitting in the corner. Or did you know that it's not standard of what you're experiencing? And so it actually took other people, both women and men, who kind of pulled me out of it and made me realize that I was experiencing something that was outside of the norm.
Thank you for sharing that. And Dana, you know, I was reading the statistic that says for every 100 men promoted to manager, there are only 79 women. You know, do you have anything to add to about the challenges that women actually face in the workforce?
I think they're similar to what our panelists have already talked about. I think from my first job to last week, I feel like people have wondered whether I'm tough enough, whether I'm smart enough, but by now I have confidence. I believe I am, and I know that I can go into that conversation, I can go onto the panel, I can go into the classroom, and people will find out they've underestimated me. And you can use that, folks, because when someone has underestimated you and they understand that, then I think you get more opportunities from that. They will remember.
Interesting, because you can still stand up for yourself and still do the work, right? But if people just aren't seeing it as that, but if the higher ups see it and you're still getting the effect and it's still impacting the company, you will still get the benefit.
I think that's right.
Thank you for sharing that. In the new Women in Workplace study by McKinsey, it says that while companies, they're committed to gender diversity, they're having the programs, they're doing the work, they're having the women's organizations, they're also saying that it hasn't translated into meaningful change, which is really interesting. Now, being the only one is still a very common experience for women. And actually the stats show that says, in fact, 1 in 5 women say often they're the only or one of the only women in the room at work, and it's twice as common for those in senior level positions as well as in the technical space. So how do you think, let's start with you, Jessica, how do you think being the only one in a women in the workplace affects you, and is it something that needs to change?
It absolutely needs to change. And I think that it affects not only the woman who is the only or who is the first, but it affects all the women who see that, who are watching.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's more how it helps to not be the only one is that it's more encouraging. There's a sense of moral support. There's a subconscious realization that there's a commitment to elevating women in an organization when you're not the only one. And so what some of those companies are missing is creating a culture of equality and getting more out of the workforce when those barriers are broken down. You get more productivity, you get more innovation, not just from the women, but from the men in the organization as well.
Thank you. I know, and me and all of us, and Mika and Jessica, we were talking about this. Have anybody seen the Pixar Pearl, that new Pixar short? Just to summarize really quickly, it was about the bro culture and how a ball of yarn joins this company and how she changes her whole, or not her, it's just a ball of yarn, changes her whole personality and everything to fit in because she's the only one, and then they love her until the other ball of yarn shows up and she realized that everything she's given up. So that's something you guys should check out. But Mika, do you have any thoughts on that in your own personal experience about being the only ball of yarn?
Yeah, there's a great scene in there about them talking about an issue, and the answer or resolution was, let's go hard, let's beat them down until they give us what we want. And I've been the only woman in the negotiations table all around the world, and they have assumed I'm not the leader of the negotiations. I've had where they would go to my male colleague with the counteroffer, and I'm in the room with them. And my male colleagues have been great in saying, no, she's the one who's leading the negotiations. And also the strategy was to go hard all the way. And I've had male colleagues come back to me and say, you know what, I really like your approach. At first I was unsure about it because I've never done it this way, but this collaborative approach of a win-win, and not just talking about pricing, but what is it that we want out of the partnership was really surprising. And at the end of the day, I think we have a great partnership and a future relationship with this supplier. So I think being the only one is definitely tough, but it also helps when you have colleagues who are there to support you.
Great. What a great example, and that's what you need to start to see is different examples, new models of leadership that may not be that, oh, go get them, knock them down, competitive. And until you see that and see that it works and companies see that, oh, it's actually working and that it's okay to have different leadership styles, something that will go into. So thank you for sharing that. And Dana, drawing from your background on diversity and employment, how does being the only one impact the organization?
Well, the academic research is clear. Diverse teams come to better results than non-diverse teams. And that follows up on what Jessica was saying, but there's no question about that. I think we can think about the bigger issue, though, too. It's better for our society when people have opportunities and when we have diverse teams. If a woman is the only woman in the room, sometimes she can be asked to speak for women. Well, that's just silly. We don't all like the same cars, food, movies, whatever that is. So that's an error. It also, though, if a woman is being asked to speak and give the woman's perspective, I think it undermines her as an effective executive or manager in the room. And so that's a problem, too, when you're the only woman in a room.
Thank you for sharing that. And I also want to say a little bit about being the only woman, being in industries like the TV news business as well as the speaking industry. Oftentimes I am the only woman in the room or the only Asian woman in the room. And sometimes that's okay because if you're paving a path, but in terms of collaboration and you don't want to be the only one that speaks up. But sometimes if you are the only woman in the room, you do need to speak up for yourself and set that example and set the tone and create that new model until you can get others to join you.
And can I add to
Yeah.
that? I find it's empowering when you see the only one or one or two in the room because it shows that we're moving in the right direction. And ultimately, there will be a balance in due time.
Yes.
And I think also what it also brings is it energizes that woman to speak up.
Yes.
And really be part of the discussion.
Definitely. Yeah, and it can be a little harder sometimes, but if you're up for the challenge, it's actually important to be the one at that table that changes the model, right? So thank you for that. So now we know that there are challenges, but let's shift our conversation to how can we make the change? How can we move things forward? And I really believe in the importance of mentors and role models, in sponsors, as well as having supportive peers. Now, how are women supporting women in their networks? And what can we do to really help people rise? Anissa?
You know, I've had the opportunity to meet and work with incredible women, both in the EMBA program as well as in my own career. And what I found is they've taught me how important it is for women to really rally around each other, support each other, and learn from each other. You know, of course, there have been situations in the past where women have competed with each other or not supported each other, but I think that, at least in my experience, I've been very grateful to really see how these situations really bring women closer together.
Yes, and I think it's important to have that support system. Mika, you also had a story to share about, especially being part of the EMBA program now.
Yep.
Can you elaborate on this question?
So I didn't appreciate the network that women can provide for each other and the support that you can get from other women. Because growing up, I was very much a tomboy, and I try to differentiate myself actually from other women, saying, no, I'm different. I can play kickball. I can do this. In response to when boys or men would say, well, you're a girl, you can't do this. But then coming to the EMBA program, I've met wonderful women who are mothers and entrepreneurs, who are starting families or new careers, that there's a lot of insight that I'm missing out on, that there's a different perspective, that there's a different approach to being a leader. Because I've often looked at myself and compared myself against male leaders, and how do men succeed in a workplace. So I think the schools provided a great platform for me to get exposed to other women and their journeys and how they develop themselves.
I love that. And I think it is important to shift the conversation. I think women have been dealt with scarcity, right? When you're the only one. I was in industries where you're the only one. If one woman got it, you didn't get it. Mm-hmm. And so that cultivates a competition factor that women are not naturally like that. So we also need to address that issue of, you know, sometimes women aren't as supportive of other women, but we can shift that, right? Going from that scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality, which, you know, after I've left the TV news business, I've shifted into that mentality. Can you speak a little bit, Jessica, about, I think this is something that's really important, is the difference between the role model and a champion, right? A mentor and someone that is an advocate.
Yes, and so I worked all that time on communication and how to change my message, and a lot of effort for very little impact in how I was received. And once I started getting mentors, it was like the keys to the castle. I suddenly had access to all this information and all these lessons learned and all these secrets on how to advance, right? By having mentors to kind of coach me and to give me feedback and to run things past and bounce things off of. The difference between a mentor and a sponsor is that the sponsor or champion is someone who will speak highly of that person when they're not in the room. So who is making my accomplishments known to leadership? Who's giving me the name recognition and expanding my brand with the people who will make decisions on promoting me or on giving me great opportunities? That person is my sponsor, and it's very important, particularly when you get to the upper levels of management and moving into executive level. It's very important to have a sponsor. Even managing directors in my firm who want to get to the C-level, they still need a sponsor. You must have someone who will sign off and speak to those accomplishments and capabilities.
Yeah, because it's a whole perspective, right? You have the mentors that are showing you the way that speed up your progression, and then you have the supportive peers, like within the MBA program. You need that to be able to bounce ideas, people who are at where you're at, to go through that. But also that next level is the advocates or the sponsors, because I think men have been doing that for a while, right? And if you're the only one and you're not getting advocated or talked about, and I think that's an important distinction that we can shift.
Yep.
Right.
I want to add to what
Yeah.
Jessica said. I think we also forget that sponsors or advocates are also outside of the work environment. Like in school or with friends, they can be your sponsors. They can speak up for you because in their workplace, something may come up and it's perfect for you. And they're like, oh, I have a friend. She has that experience. I'll connect you to her. So I think we can't just think only work, but rather that network outside of work is really important too.
And it's anyone who has the influence to get you an opportunity.
And I think when people start owning their own power and their voice, they see it as a pathway to help others, right, and lift people up. And they're like, I'm going to do that. And I think it's just something that you have to learn. Sometimes you forget. Not that they don't have it in you, but it wasn't something that we've naturally done in the past. And I think that's something that we need to push forward on. International Women's Day is tomorrow, as we said. And the theme of this year, as we mentioned before, is balance for better. Balance for better, so we have more gender balance in the media, in the boardrooms, in wealth. And it really acknowledges that this really can't come for women. I love having supportive peers, supportive women as advocates, but what we talked about before is that it really needs to be a shift in the collective culture and the conversation. So my question now is, how do we, what are some of the brightest spots or opportunities that we can create to bring people into this conversation, right? How do we bring men into the conversation and create that change? Let's start with Dana. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you started us in this direction in your keynote. You said that you are feeling a bit of a shift. And I think in the last couple of years, I don't know whether it's Me Too, whether it's momentum, what it is, but in my MBA employment law classes, I see men, I think, starting that shift themselves. They're making that shift because I'm getting lots more questions about how do we support women, what are the problems women are seeing. They're just more interested in a conversation. And I think that's positive.
Definitely, and I think that conversation is important. I think if you talk to a lot of men, sometimes they're a little scared, right? They're not don't know exactly how to address it. And so I think as women, we also have to speak in a way that people can hear us. So that's also important. But to just have the conversation, learning how to have those difficult conversations, that moves us forward. So that's really important. Mika, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm super proud of the men in our class. They join in our equity chat conversation. It's about gender equality in the workplace. And they're very honest about their experience. And first of all, we have a great group of men who are very supportive of us, who are actually asking us, what can we do? And I think it's also as important as us as women to really know what do we want and how do we articulate it so that men can help us. Because there are so many men out there who are waiting to help us. And then the other piece is, I think, just through Equity Chat, I realize is, these are also the sons, the brothers, the fathers of other people. And to have that other perspective of it's not just us women, it's about equality for all. And I think that's why a lot of men join in our conversation, because they know it's not just one-sided towards women, but it's about how do we create an equal environment for men and women, because there are things that men would like as well, that if we don't create this equal environment, they're missing out.
Definitely. And as we're talking about, women's empowerment, there's all these women's events. Women's empowerment is not about leaving out the men. It's about including the men to have a conversation where we can, eventually it won't be about feminine leadership or women leaders. It'll just be about effective leadership, right? That's what we hope. Jessica, I want to talk a little bit about, how do you think we can explore these conversations and have an open, productive conversation? I know that I want to bring out something. You talked about having a very supportive husband,
Yes.
right? Yeah, he's joining us in the audience. So can you talk a little bit more how we can bring people into the conversation and a little bit about that balance?
Well, I do want to give all due to my husband for being so supportive through a lot of stuff. But I think two very powerful things that we can do at bringing men into this conversation is, one, invite them to the conversation. Hey, let's talk about this. And two is doing some education around unconscious bias. And in the process of that, some of the research that we use in unconscious bias training is laying out that research, that data, demonstrating with numbers how much more financially powerful companies are that have a diverse workforce, that have diversity in their leadership, on their boards, that they're so much stronger financially. They produce more economically. And so if you lay out the case in numbers, it's pretty hard to say, no, I'm still going to exclude women from opportunities and from leadership positions, et cetera. Any public company certainly wants to be accountable to their shareholders, and so public companies caught on really quickly when this research first came out.
So it makes business sense, right? As well as just human sense.
Exactly.
And so thank you for pointing that out. And it's important to have that data, because sometimes you need the data to back it up in order for change to happen within the companies. And I also think it's important to look at change within our own lives. This year I'm going much deeper, and my husband is super supportive, but also there's, like you said, unconscious bias in the workplace, unconscious bias in our culture, and just taking a look and going, where have I not congruent? Where have what I'm standing for is not reflective? Or where do I need to speak up, not just at work, but maybe in my own life, to get that balance? So thank you for sharing that. Now, women outpace men in bachelor's degrees, graduate degrees, and even doctoral degrees, but not in MBAs. So how can a business education, specifically an MBA, advance women's leadership? Let's start with you, Dana.
Well, I always say to people asking me about that they should think about their last job, not the next job they want. And I hope that the next job they want is not their last job. So when you're thinking about an MBA program, you want a well-rounded program, one that will prepare you as a leader to transition as your company transitions, as you have other kinds of opportunities. You want to take advantage of the ability to work in teams. Most people do that at work now, but if you are working in an MBA program, an EMBA program, you have a chance to work with a different group, a more diverse group in terms of their industry, their background, than maybe you've had before. And you have a chance for extracurriculars, often clubs. And my advice there is to target. Do not join 20 clubs so you can list them on your resume. You can't take part in 20 clubs. Pick the things you're passionate about, the things you're interested in, and go full speed with that.
Thank you. And Anissa, how has having that background, the MBA background, helped you and further your career?
I found the leadership piece was pivotal in my career. It really helped expand my awareness in terms of where I needed to strengthen in some areas that I'd been blind to before, as well as soften in some areas that I had put too much emphasis on in the past. Dean DeRue, back then, he was Professor DeRue, taught the class, and he really helped me understand how important it is to bring your authentic self to work every day, and to really trust that your authentic self will make you and help you be successful.
Great. Thank you. And Jessica, I know you actually stayed at the same company before and after your MBA, but talk about how it impacted your career.
Well, first I want to say that I put off going to business school for about 20 years, but and it's because I was in the field, I was in consulting, I felt like I had a great trajectory and didn't really see the advantage of going to get an MBA, and I felt like I was getting so much exposure across industries, and I'm in love with consulting if you can't tell, but when I finally did it, I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I wish I'd done it much sooner. It deepened my breadth of knowledge, and it expanded my depth and breadth of knowledge. Gave me a skill set that's more relevant to the C-suite. I can have better conversations with clients at this point, so it was absolutely worth it for me. But as well, the LDP program did a similar thing for me, and just helping to shine a light on checking the box where I had some strengths, but shine the light on areas that maybe I thought were strengths that I needed to make some adjustments in. So I got a lot out of that as well, not to mention the network. Great, just had a weekend, this past weekend, our girls' weekend, bachelorette weekend, with some of my the ladies from my cohort, and we still get together at least once a year as a cohort. It was truly valuable to not just my career, but to my personal life.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, we talk about leadership. It's an essential quality in business success, and regardless of gender. But sometimes women in management, they may be held to a different standard, right, than men. Can you tell us a little bit about your own management style and how that's been impacted by maybe examples that you've seen? Mika, let's start with you.
So I've always been told that you need to take up space, kind of make sure your presence is known. You have to be the center of attention. But I found that you don't always have to be the center of attention. I think leadership is also knowing your team, how to showcase your team, how to elevate your team. And you don't want to be the one that's in the center of attention. And so I think as a leader, I've had experiences where because I wasn't the center, I've been overlooked for a promotion. But then I saw how it might have changed the direction of how the group dynamic was, because I changed my personality. I tried to become more aggressive, and I got negative feedback actually of, why are you doing this? And I also physically felt more exhausted because I was trying to do something that wasn't natural to me. So I think that's where, as a manager, I've learned to appreciate different styles of leadership, different personalities, as well as the importance of having a manager, a leader who understands my style and can elevate it to another level.
And it's important, right, to be in a workplace culture that cultivates that. And that's what we're all working towards. And sometimes you don't have those cultures, but it's nice to hear the examples of ones that are working. Anissa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I constantly spent time in the past varying between being competitive and fair, direct and polite, and aggressive and laid back. It's extremely exhausting. And I struggled with that because it is exhausting. And to your point, it's not who you are. I mean, how can you be two opposing forces at all times? You just can't. You break down at some point. So, when that goes back to the comment about the authentic self. And just really trusting that, as long as myself, my team, we remain focused on the goal and the outcome, and we understand the goal and the outcome of the parties that are in the meeting or on the team or what have you, because, even though there may be something written, people still come to the table with their own personal goals. And staying focused on that, not getting lost in the trivialities that may derail, getting lost in some of the minutiae, while standing tall, being resistant, consistency, and having grit and empathy, that's really helped me in my leadership
Interesting,
style.
yeah, and consistency. It's really interesting. It's not so much about being like someone else, but being consistent with who you want to be, right? And different situations and different companies call for different styles, but ultimately I think your core style should remain somewhat consistent, right? Consistent. And Jessica, your thoughts?
I think this theme that seems to be coming out is about authenticity, and I learned that as well. Went through adjustments in my leadership style, and my first promotion, wanted to try out being more assertive and all this. But I'm really more of a team leader, and I like to pull from everyone that I'm working with. I want the good ideas to come from anywhere, and I want people to be confident in the process. And if they're excluded from that process, then you start to lose their confidence. So that's my style. And I've worked for people, men and women, who have a totally different style, equally, sometimes even more effective. But I think that this is what works for me.
Yeah. And I think it's great to, like you said, adopting for what you feel works for that situation and seeing those different management styles so that you can see that it is okay not to be a certain way. Right, and that's why cultures that are more aggressive get that way, because everyone only sees one model and feels like that's the model that they have to emulate. I think right now we're going to open it up for live questions, right? How fun. It's like reach into the fishbowl. What does it have? Thank you. Okay. And also, if you have any questions, you can use the note cards on the bottom and of your chair, and you can ask them. All right, let's see the first one. Do you think it's more important for female leaders to be likable than male leaders? And if so, how do you think that influences habits like over-apologizing and uptalk? From Sam.
I think sometimes it's maybe a personal choice too to be concerned about being likable. What I realize is sometimes it's okay to be not liked because you have to make that tough decision and it's the right decision. And not everybody's going to like it and we have to be comfortable with it. I don't know if it's specific to women or men, but I think personally it's more something where I realize it's okay that they're unhappy because in the big picture, I know it's the right thing.
Yeah, it's like being a parent, right? I don't care.
I think in that every corporate culture is different. There's some where the way to get things moving, to influence, is that you have to be likable. So you have to almost be a chameleon and ensure that you've got the right people supporting you. Whereas in others, particularly when I was in sales, it was less about being liked. It was more about, hitting the goal and striving ahead. And so, I think that you have to kind of really understand the audience and what they're looking to achieve and how you're to work together and then adjust from there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's actually what I teach a lot of my clients when you read the room, right? When you read the room, it's the same thing as reading your company, reading your specific team within your company, reading the company culture. Maybe if you have an outside client, reading their culture as you go in and kind of not changing your core self, but maybe adjusting to that space so that you get heard. Right. First of all, you have to get heard in order to get results. Right. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone want to add to that?
I just want to say the reason we all looked at Mika is because we had this conversation before we started. So we knew she had something to say about it.
Great. And she answered it well. All right. Let's see. Do you have any tips for women in salary negotiations? And do you think having an MBA can be beneficial when negotiating salary? From Cassidy.
Well, I think one of the changes that may be contributing, I hope, to pay equity finally moving forward. We've been stuck at women making about 80% of what men make for a long time. And that means that today, the average woman is still working for free. We will be working for free this year until April 2nd, which will be Pay Equity Day. And I think one of the changes that I'm seeing is companies are less likely now to ask about prior salary, and they're less likely to take prior salary into account when they're promoting people. So use that one. You deserve to be paid the job that you're going to, and it doesn't matter if that means that it's a big jump in pay for you. And I think women should be insistent on that.
I think it's also about educating yourself and being aware of the fact that there may be a pay discrepancy. I think in my first job, I was just happy to have a job, and I didn't think about, hey, I need to make sure I'm getting this amount because this is what's being paid in the industry. And I think sometimes that first job really sets the bar for your future. So I think for any student who's negotiating their first job, they should take into consideration, well, what is everybody else getting? Because that does set the tone for your future.
Interesting. Next question. What work-life balance tips do you swear by? Desiree.
I'll take that.
Yeah, Jessica. I want you to tell them a little bit about your background. So work-life balance.
So, well, the eye-opener for some of my fellow panelists earlier this evening is that I have 5 kids, and I've had about a 20-year career in consulting. And so the question, and this is how the conversation came about, that I have a supportive husband. Like, how do you do that and continue to excel professionally and have healthy children that don't want to kill each other or kill you, and stay married, right? And it's about figuring out what your priorities are. So there are work hours. You have to know what your must-haves are. If there's a time in your life where I cannot travel, I must have work locally so I don't have to get on a plane, you make that clear. If there's a time in your life where you're going to pursue an executive MBA and you must have this number of days off every month, you make that clear and you figure out what, if any, compromise needs to happen, right? What are you willing to give up for that. But it's also about taking time for yourself. And so the balance isn't necessarily about what I'm doing or how much personal time I have. For me, it's honestly about how am I feeling? Am I feeling stressed out? Do I need to pull back on something? Do I need to recruit more help with something I'm working on? Do I need to recruit more help at home? Do we need to outsource something at home? It's about how am I feeling and taking care of my health, both energy level, physical health, mental health, relationship health. It's having a barometer for all of those things so that you can find the right balance, because the balance isn't the same for everyone.
And I think that's an important point, is that everyone's life doesn't look the same. Some have kids, some don't have kids, some have more kids, and it just depends on the situation. And I think one quote we talked about was having clarity about what matters gives you clarity about what doesn't. And I think putting in that the big rocks, I'm sure we've all heard that analogy, and you fit the other things around it. And people have different priorities, not always trying to be like the person next to you. And that seeing that, right? And self-care, and not just self-care like getting a massage self-care, but self-care like mental self-care. What can I handle? What can I not? What do I need to outsource? What do I need to ask help for? I think that's something I've struggled with, is asking for help. As a young person that succeeds, you always do everything yourself and you can do it. And then you realize you have children and a life and a job, and it's like, it doesn't work if you do it all by yourself. So that's something I'm learning every day. You guys have any other work-life balance tips to share?
For me, I think it's realizing you're not always going to be in that balance, and I think that priority is important because some things are going to drop off. I have not seen my friends. They know that I'm in school and work mode right now, so I've sacrificed my social life. But I've shared that with friends and family up front, and they understand it, and I think it's important to communicate that to people in your life too, of, hey, based on what's going on in my life right now, these are my priorities. It's not that this isn't important or that isn't important, but it's just right now, this is where I am at my time of life. And then also the asking for help is really important. I think sometimes we forget that we have great people around us who are wanting to help us, but if we don't say we want the help or ask for it, we won't get it. And there's been some great ideas from other women of, ordering like a Blue Apron or pre-made food or things like that, where instead of having to do the work ourselves, and sometimes we feel like we have to do it, we can outsource it. And there's great advice from other people.
Yeah, and I love that. If prioritizing things at the time, you're not going to have the same balance every single time. Oh, another question. I love it. It's like a surprise. Okay. What can men do better to facilitate better relationships and communications with our female coworkers? Brian. Thank you, Brian.
I think they have to be, men can listen better, and they can ask, what is it that I could do? What is it that could help you in this workplace? And just be open to listening.
I think I would add, in adding to that, I don't want to use the term unafraid, but just being open to just asking, and having the discussion. I think in some of the conversations I've had with folks, it's somewhat of a surprise. But I think things like Me Too and other movements have really opened their eyes, like, oh, wow, there is only one woman in here, So I think just being the one that starts the discussion and unafraid, if I can use that term, to not think that the woman is going to, go on a tirade about, feminism or anything. I think that will really help to really bridge any gaps.
And I like how you said that it's not necessarily about feminism, it's about being open to having difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And that conversation could be about gender, it could be about cultural background. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of diversity issues. Tonight's about women's empowerment, but it's about all empowerment of being able to have those difficult conversations that people shied away from, and inappropriate. So that's why I think initiating the conversation will allow people to be free to have them, and then being able to listen to it with an open mind, right?
Yes. And
Thank
if
you.
I could add, it's the way to express that you want to be an ally is exactly that, is opening a conversation, if you observe something happen in a meeting that you think might have made that person uncomfortable, open up the conversation about it. Say, there was a moment in that meeting where it seemed like it could have made you uncomfortable. How did you feel about that? The fact that you're asking how someone feels about something lets them know that you, one, care about how they're feeling about it, but two, that you want to be an ally and that you want to be an outlet and you want to be there for them. And it doesn't mean you're opening the door for a tirade. It doesn't mean that you want the person to start crying on your shoulder. It just means that you're being human and you're acknowledging something as another human and you're willing to open up conversation about it.
Yeah, and I think one big thing to draw upon that is that it's not a blame thing. I think men hear certain things that are wrong and it's like, oh, what can I do to fix it? Or, it's just open to that conversation because it's not an attack. Sharing information about what could change, what things look like isn't necessarily your responsibility. But just having the conversation shows that you're being willing to listen to, and you may not agree. That's the interesting thing is you may not agree, but it's okay because we came from a culture where it wasn't always talked about, so it may be new to you. So being open to listen is super important.
And if I could add one more thing.
Yeah, this is a big conversation.
Being inclusive. And one of the things that we teach in unconscious, or an example I use in unconscious bias training is if you go to lunch with the same group of guys every day, and there are women on your team or on your floor in your department, just one day invite some of them to lunch. Just, be inclusive so that they don't feel like there's this big wall between the men in the group, the women in the group. If you have the opportunity to pick, it's like if you teach your school-age children, they're picking their teams for dodgeball, right? You're going to let them never pick the girls to be on their team, or you're going to start to teach them to be inclusive. The same with project teams. If you recognize what their specific skills are. Get to know the people you work with. Okay, step one, get to know the people you work with, know what their skills are and where you can leverage them and include those people and those skills in what you're doing.
I think that you can also listen carefully in meetings, and you can do small things to support the women in meetings. Jessica talked earlier about giving an idea, having it be ignored, and then someone else giving the same idea later. Well, when the second person gives that idea and people start to coalesce behind it, you can say, oh, I think Jessica said something similar earlier. Maybe she'd like to add something here. Or if someone cuts off a woman, it's been known to happen in a meeting, you can say something as simple as, I'm not sure that Jessica was finished. And so you don't have to be loud and call out someone on those things, but I think that there are really helpful things that men can do to support women in meetings.
I love that. I love that, being able to call things out, but not in an aggressive way, just kind of like matter of fact, it's like, oh, because sometimes people don't realize what they're doing, and with more than one person speaking up about it is what causes the change. All right. Next question. How do you get what you want or need out of teams who may not want to follow a female leader? We need like a Jeopardy bell. Dun, dun, dun. No, but it's a deep question, right? How do you want to get out of teams who may not want to follow a female leader? Tough one.
I think this goes back to a comment I made earlier about staying focused on the outcome and the goal, and really understanding what their motives are, what's going to influence them, and really using that as leverage to help shift it from I'm a female leading the team to, you know what, this is your goal, this is our goal. Let's figure out how we collectively can figure out and meet that.
I love that. It's gender's not the issue. It's what's our ultimate goal and how are we going to get there. Thank you.
I think sometimes you can have some background conversations too with members of the team. And I don't mean be sneaky or try to be devious, but you can feel out people individually and try to figure out where you might be able to find some common ground and bring that back to the meeting and maybe make some progress that way.
I think that's absolutely right. I think having a one-on-one conversation with individuals who seem to be resistant to your leadership are going to be the most effective, rather than calling them out in a group or calling it out what it is in the group. But having that one-on-one conversation saying, listen, this is my objective. This is where I'm trying to take this team. Where is it you want to go? Do you want to be a part of this journey? Understanding what their goals are, what they want to get out of it. Maybe you got the job that they thought they had in the bag. So there may be some other issues underlying that. But I definitely think having that conversation one-on-one is where you start.
Can I add one
Yes,
thing to that? Along the lines of the conversation one-on-one, I had a situation occur years ago when I was in sales where the leader didn't want to have anything. He didn't want to talk to me at all. But I still had a number that I had to hit. And so what I did along the lines of having a one-on-one is working with the team around him and understanding what's happening behind the scenes so that I could still keep everything moving forward, but in some way being empathetic to whatever concerns he had about working with me. Because at the end of the day, I still had to hit a number. He still had to hit his goals for the year. So we were still working on the program, but we, as a team with his team and him, finally got some headway by working that way.
That's great, and you still got the results.
Still got the results.
And results speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right. I think in closing, now that we've tackled a lot of amazing topics, difficult topics, interesting stories, what is our vision, right? What is the vision for the future of women's leadership? And what are you hopeful for? Let's start with you, Dana.
In my ideal world, everybody would have fair opportunity. And I mean from the earliest time in education, social situations, work. And I think that if we had that kind of fair opportunity for everyone, women would do just fine.
And I agree with Dana. I think the goal is that gender's not a topic or any one specific distinct variation of a feature of a person or personality would be something that holds somebody back. And I'm super, excited and hopeful for the future, just looking at the changes in social media, the media, with the people I'm working with my classmates, and even the fact that we have this kind of a discussion, celebrating women in various leadership styles. I think it's a great sign, and it's a great momentum of the right direction for women and men.
I think part of my vision is that I'm able to raise my children where they don't see the difference in opportunity based on gender. And I think we're doing a good job of giving them that experience. They're still fairly young, but I do feel, just as Dana recognized, I do feel the shift. I do feel the momentum building. I do feel that we are getting pay equity, that we are seeing more women in leadership, and that it is about educating people on the value of that, on educating them when they are being exclusive and limiting, on educating them on the value of being inclusive and providing equity and creating a culturally equal environment. And I think we're seeing women billionaires, we're seeing women on boards, we're seeing women CEOs, and it's not just one, right? It's no longer just one. And so that's my vision, is that our children will see that as commonplace, and we won't be having, as Mika said, we won't be having this gender discussion 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I absolutely echo all of their comments. I mean, I think that the shift, to your point, is definitely happening, and there will be more of a balance as we move forward. Some industries are moving faster than others. Some industries are already there, right? But I think when we talk about the pay gap, right, there's companies that are already talking about that very publicly. And in raising that, others will follow. So I think we're absolutely headed in the right direction with momentum.
Yes, thank you so much for all your perspectives. I think that that's important for us to really take a look at, that it is part of just having the conversation, and that is how the shift happens. You know, my vision, as I said before, is really not to have a female leadership. You know, obviously we still need those groups, but to really, in the future, it's about leadership. What's effective, what works, and what doesn't. And I want the current generation right now, as we're still going through these transitions, not be afraid to own their own voice, own their own power, and create new models of what leadership looks like. I think we need to see those role models, right? Just like when I saw Connie Chung, I didn't know. You just see something. You don't know what you want to be, or, you know, but having those discussions, and I've seen my daughter and my son, you know, in school, it's very different. But it's still going to take a little time for it to filter through, but I do have great hope for the future and to continue have these lively conversations. So I thank you for coming and being a part of Momentum, and thank you all for coming.